Oh, I love this moment. Last service was truly a blessing, and I believe you're going to be pleasantly surprised, challenged, enlightened, and you're just going to have a simpler understanding of the gospel and how it functions in our world today. If Tucker says exactly what he said last service. Now, he's like me. There's no notes, so I'm still like, what's he going to say this time? Now he scared me. That's great. How are you excited? It's not always moments like these that people sweep through our church that have been so generous to this church, simply asking for us to cover travel costs so they can just come in and talk and expose America to what's going on nationally and how as Christians we can have a deeper understanding of what we're facing. I want you to put a warm Cornerstone welcome to Mr. Tucker Carlson.
Expose you. I'm the one who has been exposed. I've never seen anything like this in my whole life, and that's sincere. I live in Washington, D.C., which is, I think, about 500 or 600 miles. It's a time zone from here, but I feel like I'm coming from Botswana or Burma or something. It's like a completely different world, and I am so impressed and shocked by the way that you worship. I come to church every week. I go to an Episcopal church. I've gone to the same one since high school. Everyone in the church believes in God because why would you go otherwise? We have great restaurants. There are other things to do. But every one of them knows that, you will be punished for expressing that belief in church. So your pastor said to me during worship, I'm listening to the drums, which I love. Every church needs rhythm, I've decided. I had no idea. But I'm sitting here during the worship, and I'm, of course, I'm the only man in a necktie, standing super still. And your pastor says, you can raise your hands. And I'm thinking, well, no, I can't. I get points detracted if I do that. I've gone to the Episcopal church my whole life. I'm 49. I've never heard one person clap a single time, ever. So this is completely... And by the way, I don't judge. There are different worship styles, but this is completely blowing my mind, and I just love it. I don't know how I missed this. Anyway, thank you so much for having me. It's just wonderful. And the fact that your church sends people to emergency rooms and hospitals to pray for them at that moment in their lives really touched me when your pastor told me that this morning. I was in the hospital last year briefly, just for appendicitis. In the Episcopal Church, we believe in ignoring our problems. And by the way, most of them go away, if I can just say a word for our tradition. If you pretend something doesn't exist, sometimes, it doesn't. But appendicitis is not in that category. It actually gets worse. And I went up in the hospital. No one came and prayed for me. I wish someone had. So anyway, bless you for that. So I just want to, I've never spoken in a church before today, ever. I've never even thought about it. So yeah, it's kind of great, actually. So I will not be political, and actually deep down I'm not very political. I'm actually less political than I've ever been, which is odd considering I host a nightly political show on a political network in the most political moment in our history, certainly since, the last 140 years. But the question really is, what is going on? And it's a little bewildering for me since I have done a species of the same job for over 20 years. Go on TV, debate the public policy issues. They typically break down along left and right. And it's been pretty straightforward. There's an argument about what the country ought to do corporately as a country, and each side marshals evidence to support their respective cases. I think we ought to do this, and here's my evidence. The other side says the same, and viewers can decide who's got the most evidence. This is often described as a left-right debate, and it has been. And now, with the temperature rising, I would argue it's probably dangerous levels in Washington. People often come up to me in airplanes and say, the partisan bitterness is so intense. People are in their camps. It's become tribal. It's awful. And of course, I agree with that completely. But it does raise the question, what is this actually about? And it's something that I've brooded on for the last year and a half as it's gotten more intense. And my initial assumption, as I just said, was that this was a debate over ideas. And it's not. It's nothing like that. And one of the reasons that the rest of us are so unsettled by this is because we don't recognize what's actually happening. This is a theological debate. This is a spiritual debate. And let me just say very clearly, it's not a debate between good and evil. I know a lot of people on the other side, they're my neighbors. I live in a city that voted 96% for a candidate I didn't vote for and would never vote for. And they're good people, a lot of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. And a lot of them are my friends. So when I'm debating someone, I don't assume that that person is a bad person, because most of them aren't. But that doesn't mean that it is not a religious debate. That's what it is. So my whole childhood into my adulthood, the debate was between people of faith and people of reason. That was the way the debate was presented to us, between people who believed in God and people who believed in science. Now, I was always more on the God side, but I acknowledge science. That's no longer what it is. And this came to me recently, maybe 6 months ago, during a debate on gender and the biological reality of gender, which is being challenged. And let me just say at the outset that I am by temperament not a judgmental person, and I actually don't care how people dress. And I hope you won't judge me for my ludicrous neckwear. So I wasn't going into it hoping to attack anyone, but I was going into it with an assumption that I thought every person in the Western world had, which is that biology is real. I had 4 children, okay? And I didn't change a ton of diapers, but enough to know that biology is actually real. Everything they told me in 6th grade turns out to be true. We have boys and girls, they grow up to become men and women. This is not the product of our choice, it's not what we want, it's what happens organically because it is nature. And nature, by its nature, is something over which we have no control. We can't make the sun rise, we can't stop the hurricanes. We have to adjust our lives to the things we did not create and cannot control. That is called reality. Amen. It is as we find it. And we are the ones who adapt. All of a sudden, and this seems self-evident to me, that's not a political question. You know, by the way, if you can stop the sun from rising, go ahead and show me. And I'll be impressed. And you can redefine the terms of the debate. But until you do that, I'm going to assume that we're both working off the same set of notes here called biological reality. And in the middle of that debate, which very quickly became a non-debate, became one person talking and me staring like a golden retriever, like, well, really? I learned that I was talking to someone who believed that he had control over nature itself. I don't think there should be 2 sexes, therefore there aren't. Now at the level of like college dorm room theorizing, I could, okay, maybe there should be more sexes, I don't know. Maybe there should be free ice cream, I'm for that. But there isn't, and there aren't. And in that moment I realized I was not having a political conversation, I was having a theological one. And once I began to see the world through that lens, everything made sense. There are 2 camps. They are not Republicans and Democrats. They are not liberals and conservatives. Those terms mean less than they have meant in my lifetime. I couldn't exactly tell you what a conservative is on the issues. What tax rate does a conservative support? I don't know. Is a conservative for invading Syria? I'm not sure. So it's actually not the root argument. The root argument is, do you think you're in control of the universe or don't you? That is what we're actually debating. And it goes by various names. There's a lot of deception that prevents us from seeing what's really being discussed. But the truth is, the people who run most of our institutions in this country, and by the way, they're of both parties, tend to believe that they are wholly in charge. You heard your pastor sum it up almost parenthetically, but very precisely. God raises us from the dead. You will die. That's the one thing you can't control. Doesn't matter how many boxes you check, how virtuous you are. In the end, you will lie, likely alone, terrified, and in pain, and exit this world. That awaits all of us, and on some level we know that every moment of every day. And Christians look at that, which is the basic and most painful truth of life, death, and say, I have a hope of what comes after. That is the essence of, from my perspective, as a non-theologian talk show host, far be it from me to lecture you on theology. As an Episcopalian, it's kind of ludicrous I've been saying this. But that is the most basic of all truths. And by the way, it is also the root of all anxiety. Your anxiety, if you strip away, if you get the onion to its core, you know you're going to die. Only faith in God answers what happens next. So there is the other half of our country, I wouldn't even say it's half, that looks at that and says, no, we have control of life and death. This is really a debate about who's in charge. It's a debate ultimately in charge. It's a debate over power. And the one thing that powerful people can never admit is that their power is limited. In fact, it's harder to get them to admit that. I'm just searching for a metaphor here. Maybe than to get a camel through the eye of a needle. That's what that's really about, in my opinion. The more power you have, the harder it is for you to admit that in the end you have no power. That is the thing they are hiding from you. And that is the thing they will go to any length to prevent you from knowing. That in the end, they're as sad and terrified as you are, as we all are, because that's the nature of living as a human being, with the unknown and with the powerlessness of being human and not being God. So look, here's the point. It used to be the faithful versus the secular. I don't know if that was ever true. I don't think there is a secular person, period. We are hardwired for faith. It is baked in the cake. It's who we are. So the question is, are you going to worship God or are you going to worship man? That's the question. And so that is the debate. And you see it. I mean, that is why if you look up at your screen, and I hope, though I do work in TV, I hope you don't spend too much time watching television. Probably not so good for you. When you look up and you see people and you think, wait, I can't tell if I agree with that person or not. Person says he agrees with me, but I can tell he's not speaking for me. It's because the categories have been completely shifted around. There are people who say they're in your party, on your side, have your beliefs, and yet at the very bottom of their assumptions is the belief that they're in charge. Okay? This is what the debate, I don't want to get political, but the one subject I'll mention, political subject, is abortion. And by the way, I'm not political at home. We don't talk politics in my house. I never talk to my children about politics or with my wife. The only subject that I've ever broached with my 4 children is the question of abortion, not because I wanted to, but because it's the most basic question. Do you have the power to take life? Is it up to you to decide when life ends? Are you God? That's the real question behind it. Are you God? And I think it's pretty clear that no, you're not. And I've been, pretty hesitant about telling my kids what tax rate they should support. I don't have any hesitance at all in telling them the truth. You're not God. You don't get to decide when to end life. It's not up to you. You weren't born with that power. You will never have that power. The only time you get to take life is in self-defense. That's it. And abortion doesn't qualify. I think once you know that, it puts everything in perspective. Once you know that you're not in charge, your whole worldview changes. You're much less vulnerable to hubris, which is the great killer. What comes before the fall? Anyone? Oh, I love that. Can I get an amen? They don't say that in my church. I love that. Can I get a witness? My whole life I've wanted to say that. Thank you. You just made a dream come true for an Episcopalian boy from Washington. That's so awesome. Excuse me. Anyway, it's not a question of what specific bullet points in somebody's platform you believe or support. I'm sure if you unfurled the Republican platform, there are things I've never heard of and don't agree with. Same with the Democratic platform. The only question that matters is, do you think you're God? So I don't know, I'm sure all my neighbors would lay down their lives for the right to have an abortion. I don't think any of them would have an abortion or want their girls to have an abortion. They think it's disgusting. I don't think anybody wants to have an abortion. I think people who actually do have abortions tend to be alone and scared and poor. They're not doing it because they want to. They're doing it because there's no one there to support them in their decision not to. No one thinks it's a happy thing, so why are people willing to pound on the front doors of the Supreme Court over it? You saw it yesterday. Because they love abortion? It's disgusting. No one even uses the name. It's so disgusting. They hide it behind euphemisms. No. What they're arguing for is the pretense that they're God. We reserve the right to end life because we're in charge. That's what they're really saying. That's what the debate is really about. So what does this mean for you and for the country? It means two things. Well, it means probably a lot of things, but I just want to mention two. One, once you understand that you are debating a fellow religious person, and the only difference in your religion is who you worship, you start to understand the stakes are a little bit higher. So the main difference between the people I debate on TV and me is that as a Christian, I don't believe that you can impose faith on somebody else. The essence of Christianity is the choice to believe. Peter denied Jesus 3 times on the eve of his crucifixion, and Jesus let him do it. Jesus himself had the choice when he was in the desert for 40 days. He could have made other choices, but he didn't. He decided, Peter decided, we decide whether we believe. It's up to us. There is no faith by force in Christianity. Period. Our free will is the essential ingredient in the formula. God gives that to us. The other side is a very different view of it. Very much like Islam in the 9th century, if I can say. I'm not attacking Islam, by the way. I'm not. I don't agree with it, but I tend to respect faithful people. But Islam in the 9th century spread from what we now call Saudi Arabia northward through the Levant to southern Europe. Why? Like that, because it was conversion at sword point. Believe or be killed. That is a deeply, both Abrahamic faiths, it's a deeply un-Christian understanding. It's the opposite of what we believe. And yet that is what the other side now believes. That they have a right to tell you not simply how to behave, we'd all agree with that. In a society, we have rules about how you behave. You may not sleep in a crosswalk. Not allowed. Not that I've tried. And I wouldn't recommend you try it. You'll get arrested. Not allowed. We can't have that. Fine. That's totally fine. You get to control my behavior. The one thing you can't control is what I believe. My conscience is my own. I'm free. That's what they're challenging right now. Is your freedom to believe what you want to believe and to worship your God in your way, not hurting anyone else, not pushing anyone else to do what you do, doing it alone. They want to change that. Think of it this way. Is there anyone here in this room right now who is worried as you sit and angry right this second about what people in Brooklyn believe in their hearts? Is this a major concern for you at this moment sitting in church? That somewhere in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, someone might disagree with you? Probably not that concerned at this moment. Fair to say? Right. I can promise you at this very moment in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, someone is very angry that you don't agree, that you're not with the program. This is an evangelical faith that we are facing. Literally evangelical, seeks to evangelize and convert by force. And so the battle is not over some issue. The battle is over the freedom to believe what you choose to believe. And I just want you to know, since I'm right face to face with it every single day, there are people who want to make you not just do different things, but think different things. I don't think we've seen that ever. The second difference, and the one that comes to me all the time and that I brood over and makes me sad, is that if you have a faith that is not based on something larger than you, then that faith is limited by human power. What does that mean? Well, it means, among many other things, that there is no forgiveness in that faith. And you are seeing it on display now. If you're wondering, and by the way, I'm not here to endorse Kavanaugh or whatever. I've never met Kavanaugh. I don't have strong, I'm glad he got, whatever. He's on the Supreme Court, great. I'm not here to defend Brett Kavanaugh. I'm here to defend the human and Christian proposition that all of us are capable of changing and being forgiven for what we have done wrong. All of us. To me, that's how I spot a Christian. I mean, as I've already noted, I come from a faith where you're not supposed to talk out loud, okay? Or express your faith in any possible way. So how do you spot a sincere Episcopalian from one who's just there for the stained glass? By how they love other people. By the fruit, of course. That's how I always know that I'm in the presence of a sincere Christian. Because while that person has the goal in mind and the standards ever present at top of mind, that is probably the least judgmental person I'm around that day. Because Christians know, above all, how flawed they are. That's the one thing they know. As my father always used to say, and he used a bad word, which I'm not going to repeat here. He was a salty former Marine. But he always used to say, the root of all wisdom is knowing what a jerk you are. It's true. Meditate on that. You want to be wise? Sit and stew in your own shortcomings. And that is true. All of a sudden, our political conversation has become one in which there is no forgiveness. You did something wrong. We can debate whether you did something wrong. But the proposition is, the claim is that if you have done something wrong, at some point in your life, deviated from this one true path, it's over for you. There's no hope. Now, the beauty of being a Christian is you don't have to deal with that. Because you're not in charge of judging. There's someone else who is. That's God. People don't have to judge. I sometimes get grouchy on TV, 5 hours live a week, a parade of unreasonable people sitting across from me. I lose my temper. I try not to. But every time I do, my wife, the former religion teacher, who's a deeply polite, bone-deep polite person, always says to me, you don't have to win, and you don't have to judge, actually, in the end. Someone else is going to do that. And I think Christians believe that as a core belief. You can make your case, you can say what you think is true. Above all, you can inspire by the way you live, but you don't have to condemn anyone to hell or pull anyone up into heaven, because you're not God. God is God. What a huge relief that is for the rest of us. Once you know that you do not have the obligation to save other people from their own sinfulness, in fact, you're joining them there, right in the pit of their sinfulness. That's you too. Once you know that, what a burden off your shoulders. I always tell my children the same thing, and I don't think they believe me, but it's hard to know with kids. Sometimes I think they're like dogs, all they hear is their name. Like that Far Side cartoon, Bobby, huh? But I tell them relentlessly anyway because I really believe it. I always say, whatever you're hiding is known. Whatever you think you're keeping from other people, they already know. Because we always know what other people are about. God has given, I really believe this, God has given us the power of smell, of intuition. If you're in the presence of somebody, even for a short period, you know who that person is. His strengths and his weaknesses, his silly little pretenses, the envy he tries to keep inside. It's right out there for you. You know instantly he's insecure. Oh, he's got a drinking problem. Like, you know. And by the way, we're trained to ignore those intuitions. My father was kind of a brilliant guy. He always used to say, never lose touch with your inner dog. By which he meant, dogs know. You don't like dogs? No hiding it from him. Oh, it's nice to see you. Dog snarls at you. Dogs instantly know how you feel. Because there's no higher consciousness to convince them otherwise. Oh, bad person, whoa. They know. And we know too. And so all the time that you spend trying to convince everybody else that you're someone else is wasted time. It's a Halloween costume that everyone can see through. But the good news is, and I always end with my kids on this, they love you anyway. People love you for the flawed, semi-pathetic person you are. And isn't that the greatest blessing of all? That's a mirror of how God feels about us. In a world with no God, there's no forgiveness, and in its place, what is there? If there are standards you can't meet and no way to dodge their requirements, nowhere to hide, what do you have to do? You have to lie. That's what you have to do. And if you look up, if you've lived in this country a long time and you've looked up in the last year and noticed that everybody's lying all the time, it's a blizzard of deception. It's bewildering and corrosive. We all tell lies. Usually the people we love because we love them and we want them to love us back. Never lie to an Uber driver because who cares what he thinks? It's like your personal shrink. It's crazy. It's great. But we lie to the people we love because we want them to think well of us. That's why our children lie to us, because they love us most. But it's not good for you over time. And if you wake up in a world where everyone's lying, you know they're doing it because they feel they have no choice. And that's the world we're living in right now. It's the opposite of the one that this church promises us, that the New Testament promises us, and that the lives of faithful Christians showcase to us every day. The life of someone who sincerely believes in God is a transparent life, because you don't have to pretend. The most moving thing I have heard this year, I heard from your pastor. It made me emotional hearing about it. But it was about the founding pastor of this church and his life story. And your pastor said, people have criticized him about that. And I thought, that's the opposite of how I feel. That's the most inspiring, joyful thing I have heard. I can't remember the last time I heard something I loved hearing that much. Why? Because it's living proof that the promise is real. It doesn't matter what you did. You can be the man you just saw in the video. What? Talk about good news. Honesty, forgiveness, truth, an answer to what happens when you die? Yeah. Anyway, I'm going full blown. I gotta stop. Anyway, look, bottom line, when you assess what's happening on TV and you'll hear all these blowhards, this is it, and this is it, and it's got this many, it's noise. What you're seeing is the deepest of all struggles. The struggle between the Pharisees, people of the law, and the Christians, the people of forgiveness. That's what you're really watching. Never forget that. I can't thank you enough for having me. I'm on this long book tour, doing all these book signings. I didn't even know I was doing this. And this has completely blown my mind. It's really been a wonderful experience for me, and I'm grateful to you for allowing me to come. Thank you.
Sit down. How many of you walked in this house with the perception in your mind? Let's be honest. How many of you were like, that is not what I thought was fixing to happen? I learned something today. I got a new lens to look at our nation. For we do not wrestle with flesh and blood. Our fight is not against our fellow Americans. Our fight against a principle is who is Lord. Who is in charge? Is it God or is it us? And at the end of the day, as you look through your political lens, every lens you look through, you just look at who ends up in charge. We can disagree on taxes, we can disagree on everything, but when it comes to fundamental morality, who's in charge? I learned a lot today, and I told Tucker, I said, I was nervous, man. He's like, well, I said, I have no idea what you're going to say, but then again, I had no idea what Dad was going to say for the last 27 years as a pastor. So I'm like, I said, I'm not political. He's like, I'm not political. I was like, but you run a talk show. He goes, no. And who he showed us today was something more than just what we see on TV. How many of you know that? Let me give you the Bible verse for the day that's going to sum up everything that he just said. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Not to be in bondage to a yoke of sin, but to live this righteous life. You do not have to hide your brokenness in this house. We already know you're broken. And we're not going to hide the answer. That if we want to get back to a great nation, we've got to become a great people. And the only way to become a great people is to be a people that loves God and loves people like he loves them. Amen?